And Berlin are split over what the right approach to the Ukrainian crisis is. Barack Obama and Angela Merkel gave a press conference today in D.C. in which they expressed very different views on sending military aid to Kiev.
I've always said I don't see a military solution to this crisis. We should work towards a diplomatic approach.
If, in fact, diplomacy fails, what I've asked my team to do is to look at all options. And the possibility of lethal defensive weapons is one of those options that's being examined.
RT's Gina Chichikan was there and listened to the press conference for us.
The leaders tried to be diplomatic about their differences, but those differences did come out in the news conference. Angela Merkel literally said she couldn't live with herself if she didn't do everything possible to achieve a diplomatic solution. And she said again that she sees no military solution in the conflict in Ukraine. She reiterated her opposition to the idea of arming the Ukrainian government. The U.S. president did not say he sees no military solution, although he had said that before, but not this time. He said his team is looking at options in case diplomacy fails, and that arming the Ukrainian government is the option they're looking at. That is despite the fact that just last week, President Obama's spokesperson said sending arms to Kiev could increase the bloodshed. The U.S. Congress is pushing for sending arms. Some hawkish heads in Washington are pushing for that, and they seem to be successful in convincing President Obama that it is a viable option. So Europe and the U.S. do seem divided on this.
Now, Europe itself is also divided on whether to provide Kiev with lethal aid. Lithuania says Ukraine should be helped militarily, and the Polish foreign minister said his country is ready to sell weapons to Kiev. But the German defense minister says there are already far too many weapons in Ukraine. His position was backed by the Austrian foreign minister, who believes the conflict will only escalate if the U.S. goes ahead. And British foreign secretary also doesn't think supplying arms is the right thing to do. But foreign affairs expert Nebojsa Malic thinks U.S. plans to send weapons will undermine peace talks.
Just the message that the U.S. is considering to send weapons is going to be encouraging the regime in Kiev not to engage in any sort of diplomacy and continue to pursue military means to resolving this crisis. European relations with Washington are very complex. The European Union by itself has no policy of its own, and this is the way Washington has wanted it from the very beginning. So you can play certain countries against each other. People who have interests in their own neighborhoods tend to prioritize that over some sort of joint strategy. And I think one of the basic policy goals of Washington in Europe is to prevent any sort of coherent joint European policy from arising ever. And so the Europeans are trying desperately to get some way out of this crisis that would also give their project a much-needed legitimacy boost after the events in Greece. Whether Washington will allow them to do that remains to be seen.